There we are. Okay, well, Bill generally starts this way in reviewing who won the Peace Prize before. So we're talking about the Peace Prize. Can we hear? Can everybody hear? Is this working?
Yeah.
The mic's working? Okay, so 21, Maria Ressa, efforts to safeguard freedoms of expression as a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. And the Peace Prize always is about peace, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise. 22, 2 years ago, Alexis Balieski from Belarus, similar idea for promoting peace in that area of the world. And he got it. And then last year, of course, Iran, fight to promote human rights in Iran and fight against oppression. So, star-studded group of people. So here's the 24 Nobel Peace Prize. And who won it? But before we go here, I want to ask one question to the audience. This is a fairly tough thing to watch. It's about the bombs dropped on Japan during the end of World War II. And so I have a quick question. And that is, do you pronounce it Hiroshima or Hiroshima? Who says Hiroshima? Hands? Hiroshima? Hiroshima? Okay, it's about even. I'm going to use Hiroshima, and I hope this will be one of the easier parts of this. Now, who won it? Neon Hadenko, which is a group of survivors from the atomic bomb in Japan. So, and the reason they did it, for its efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons and demonstrate through witness testimony, very important witness testimony, that they should never ever be used again. And a lot of this presentation is about that. In a world ridden with conflicts, they want to highlight how very important it is to continue as we have for, I think, a remarkable 80, 79 years in preventing nuclear weapons. And we have, I think, started to think about it less than we did. Certainly when I was growing up. I was born in 41, and when I was going to school in 46, 47, 48, the idea of a nuclear holocaust was still very close to us, and I think we've kind of forgotten the urgency of it, and I think that was one of the reasons the committee gave the prize to these survivors who, like many of us, certainly like me, are now all in their 80s. So, who won it? We're talking about that. Oh, I'm going backwards here. So there were survivors of the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the association was formed in '56, and they were for promoting non-use of nuclear weapons. They petitioned the government, the United Nations, and they want to establish a nuclear disarmament treaty that everyone signs, and they did a lot of study and so on into the horrors of nuclear war. So here was the co-chairman, and when he was presented this at the United Nations, really, he was crying, and he couldn't believe that he was there and that he was getting this award for the work that they've done in all those years. And of course, it brought back memories of what had gone on, and he talked about the contemporary situation in Gaza. Bleeding children held by their parents, it's like Japan 80 years ago. Very powerful statement from a survivor. And here's the Secretary General. He was 5 years old when he was exposed to the atomic bomb at Nagasaki. So, and they're called Hibakusha, and they've never given up their mission on preventing the creation of more Hibakusha. And again, that was what he did. Now, just before we get into it, I'm going to play a brief comedy song about nuclear war. Now, this was recorded by Tom Lehrer in 1960. And in 1960, we were kind of over the initial shock of it all and could begin to make some fun of it. And I thought I'd play this at the beginning because it's all downhill after this. So I will try to see if this works. We had it running very well before, and I'm hopeful that it will go again. If not, we'll get Debbie. Should start.
All right. A few weeks ago, the American press reported that China had exploded a nuclear bomb. Now, this was a great leap forward for China, of course, but it was an even greater leap forward for the American press because for the first time they called it China instead of Red China. For 18 years they've been hoping it would just go away. And for the first time they called it a bomb instead of a device. So, with China possessing the bomb, it makes us wonder, who's next? First we got the bomb, and that was good, 'cause we love peace and motherhood. Then Russia got the bomb, but that's okay, 'cause the balance of power is maintained that way. Who's next? France got the bomb, but don't you grieve, 'cause they're on our side, I believe. China got the bomb, but have no fears, they can't wipe us out for at least 5 years. Who's next? Then Indonesia claimed that they were going to get one any day. South Africa wants two, that's right. One for the black and one for the white. Who's next? Egypt's gonna get one too, just to use on you-know-who. So Israel's getting tense, wants one in self-defense. The Lord is our shepherd, says the psalm, but just in case, we better get a bomb. Who's next? Luxembourg is next to go, and who knows, maybe Monaco. We'll try to stay serene and calm when Alabama gets the bomb. Who's next?
So, a little levity at the beginning. I'm glad we could laugh about it, and I guess we still can. I mean, it's amazing when I think about it. I had to do quite a lot of research. It's amazing that 80 years later, we still have not done it again. So that was Tom Lehrer's take. Did I do this? I'm hitting the wrong way. So we're going to remember what it was like. So this is deaths in World War II. And as we can see, it's a little surprising. I mean, Canada, incidentally, hardly shows here. We lost 45,000 people in the war, only in the war, no civilians. So these show the total deaths and the deaths as a percentage of population. So Russia was really hit, as was China. China, of course, was the Japanese that were bombing Russia, or Soviet Union, and it was Germany that was, and it was Japan was bombing China. That's why those two are so high. We know the war was Germany and Japan on one side. But considerable number of deaths all the way through. It was really very lucky that we got over the thing. You look at these things, and all the more so because right at the end of the war, of course, they developed the atomic bomb. So very sobering. And as we can see also, the Allies and others took more hits than the Axis, Japan and Germany. Now, many of those deaths were caused by fire bombs. So we're looking here specifically at Japan. This was before nuclear. 330 killed, 8 million left homeless. We're very aware of homelessness these days. 8 million, staggering. We're talking about 1945. 40% of the country destroyed. When we think about Gaza, we can get some sense. And 60% of the country of it went up in flames. As I say, this isn't going to be that easy to watch, or easy at all. Now we come to the A-bomb part. That was just conventional weapons. No problem, no A-bombs. Nuclear fission was discovered by a couple of a German and Austrian in 1938. And then there was a theoretical explanation for why it worked, which I actually found quite interesting. And the woman who did it was Lise Meitje. She was a Swiss and Hungarian, I believe. And this is what she figured out, or she postulated, that the nucleus, I found this interesting because I had no idea how this worked, that the nucleus was like a drop of water, and sort of a long drop of water, and it would pinch in the middle and then split into 2 drops when they bombarded it, and that would release a huge amount of energy. So that's kind of how it worked. That was the theory, a very important theory to how it was going to work. And so, with this in mind, and they had the idea of how it was going to work, the Manhattan Project in the States, they decided in 1942 that they were going to build a bomb using that suggestion on how it might work. And they chose, now very well known, particularly since the movie, Oppenheimer to head the project. So he got the nod, and he was a surprise choice because, and this is a very important point, the whole development of this bomb, most of the people involved with it in the States were communists. They'd been communists in the 30s, which meant they were humanists. They thought this was the way to go. It would end capitalism, we'd share and share alike. And as it turned out, most of the people that ended up involved with the atomic bomb had been very sympathetic to the communist way of doing things as opposed to capitalist countries. He had almost no leadership experience. He's shown here with Gross, we'll see him again later, and he never won a Nobel Prize. Most of the people who ended up working for him were Nobel Prize winners. So here he is, 1904, 1962, father of the atomic bomb. Yay, Oppenheimer, I don't know. But he was a Harvard graduate. He didn't go to MIT, which is surprising, since most of them did. He went to Germany. Max Born, who we know was a German intellectual, studied with him. And he came back and was a professor of physics at Cambridge. The guy was no slouch.
He studied with Max Born.
Yes. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He studied with him, yes. Where he got his PhD.
Yeah.
Then he went to Berkeley, and he was one of the few physics guy who really understood quantum mechanics at the time. There were not a lot of people. And he got most of it, I think, from the reading that I've done from taking his PhD under Max Born. So he was married a couple of times, and I put them up here, or he wasn't married a couple of times. He was only married once, but he had a significant love affair with this woman, Tatlock. She was a psychiatrist, and again, she was a communist, and not just a communist, she was a writer for the Western Worker, which was, you know, workers of the world unite. And this is all to sort of try to give a sense of what it was like in the 30s. It was very different, the attitude toward the Soviet Union. They were on our side. Germany and Japan were on the other side. And as I did the research, that became more and more important. This is his wife. She was a German-American. And this is a picture of her in her clearance that she needed to visit him at, in Los Alamos, where they were developing the bomb. So, but she was also with the Communist Party until leaving in the 30s, but I think it was kind of the late 30s. There was no question where the sympathy of these people were. And they had homes in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Now, Valmai and I have lived in Santa Fe for quite a while, so we know a little bit about this. It's not quite so primitive these days, but this was the first place he had with a friend of his. They bought 156 acres, and they had this little cabin. He got a much nicer place later, right in Santa Fe, and this is Los Alamos. This is an overhead of Los Alamos. Later on, that's where he was working. And this was another house of his in Santa Fe. So, nice houses. Valmai and I are always interested in nice houses. And off to work we go. This is where he worked, up in this kind of landscape. And this is the main gate to the Los Alamos project. And it's interesting how primitive it is, given what was going on inside, I find. Things to me seemed a lot simpler in the 30s. Maybe they weren't, but we wouldn't think of this now as a top US military base, which certainly was at the time. So they were there to develop the bomb. Take careful notes so you can do this when you go home. I just thought I'd put this up. These drawings are often so simple. You think, oh my goodness, but of course, that's the way it is. Anyway, it tells you what you do. The cylindrical plug of active material, a temper to focus the neutrons and keep them from reacting to increased efficiency. They explored different designs using different kinds of implosion. And somebody called Richard Tolman, who we'll see before, had the possibility of using different methods to create even greater explosions. Tolman, as we'll see, became the father of the H-bomb. So this is a little more detail. You can look at it for a moment, but there's fission and fusion. It took me a long time to get my head around what they are, and I'm not sure that I fully understand it, but they're the two elements, fission and fusion. And this is a little shot of what they were working with. Now, Santa Fe in the 40s was an absolute hotbed of spies. And it still is. Valmai recently met someone on the train a few years ago, going into Albuquerque from Santa Fe. It's about 50 miles away. And the guy told her, oh yeah, I'm in Santa Fe. I'm with the CIA. Tons of CIA people are in Santa Fe. And clearly they're there because of Los Alamos. It's been a hotbed since the 40s. So, but these are just a few of the big names. Fuchs, past weapons. This is Fuchs. He's the best known name, or perhaps short of the Rosenbergs. These are the Rosenbergs, who we hear about all the time. In fact, Mrs. Rosenberg was not a spy, but her husband was. This is David Greenglass. He was the brother-in-law of Julius. So it was a tight little community. And this guy he was knighted, Sir James Chadwick. He was not a spy, probably, but he worked, I put him up because he worked with Chalk River in Canada, and they were developing heavy water and all of this business. It was topical, and he was British and was kind of suspected. So this is Santa Fe in the 40s, lots of spies, lots of curiosity about what was going on in Los Alamos. And this is back to Edward Teller, who's the father of the H-bomb. He and Oppenheimer, maybe understandably, didn't get along terribly well. And in 1954, he actually denounced him to a congressional committee, which some of you may remember. And he was charged, well, this is what he said, he was equivocal when they asked him during the committee hearings what, he wouldn't say, yes, Oppenheimer was a spy. And there was not a lot of convincing enemy, except there were spies that were communists. His wife was a communist. He had communist sympathies when he went to Berkeley, Oppenheimer. And so this is what he actually said. In a great number of cases, I have seen Dr. Oppenheimer act. I understand that Dr. Oppenheimer acted in a way which, for me, was exceedingly hard to understand. So he kind of damned him with faint praise. It was a disaster for Oppenheimer now, well after the war in '54. And he never really recovered his reputation. He was fired, he was kicked out of the program, and so on. So even though he'd done so much for the American program, and you can't help it, there was some jealousy between the two guys. They were both smart, they were both interested, and in fact, Edward Teller took it all the way to the H-bomb. So, finally, we're going to come to the testing. This was the test for the first bomb. Things were simpler back there. This is where they put it together. This is 35 miles from White Sands where they did the first test. Valmai and I are particularly susceptible to pictures like this because we like Santa Fe. We like this sort of look now in Santa Fe, but it does seem remarkable that this was where they assembled the bomb to do the first nuclear test 35 miles away at White Sands, and that is a picture of the very first explosion. So high-tech in their houses and living operations, they weren't. So that bomb went off, and then they came around and had a look at it. This is what was left immediately after the bomb went off. That's Oppenheimer, and that's Groves, the colonel who was in charge of the operation. And that was ground zero. Much smaller bomb, of course, than what they ultimately used. So that was the testing. America had the bomb. Japan hadn't surrendered. The powers, the Britain, the States, Russia got together. They had issued this ultimatum, and Japan said that no, they weren't going to surrender, basically. So, and they emphasized that they were building more planes and they were basically ready for war. And there are a lot of lessons in this for us now, particularly that we've been so lucky to avoid this for so long. So they had the bomb, they needed to drop the bomb. This is the crew for a plane called the Enola Gay, which did drop the first atomic bomb. And this is the pilot. This is another line from Tom Lear. So long, Mom, I'm off to drop the bomb, so don't wait up for me. Anyway, they had to alter the plane and so on. It wasn't just a matter of shoving it in and going, but they did it. And where did Enola Gay come from? It was named after the pilot's mother. So now we get to the very difficult part of this thing. This was Hiroshima in the 40s before the bomb. So get ready. This was the bomb they used in Hiroshima. There were two bombs. It was Little Boy and Fat Boy. This was Little Boy. It was the one they used first. There it goes. This is an actual photograph of the bomb over Hiroshima. And that's it, right after the bomb. 90 to 160,000 dead. It's agreed now more, it was closer to 160. And that was August the 6th. The war didn't finish. That's the area at Hiroshima, just to get an idea, 13 square miles. 63% of the buildings, can you hear me? This is, yeah. 63% of the buildings destroyed. 92% of the structures were destroyed or damaged. So it had its effect. But it wasn't over because of 3 days later, they dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki. That's the explosion. That was the result. I mean, these things have never happened in history before. Totally shocking. Even looking at them today, I find them hard to look at. And we, thank God it hasn't been used for 80 years and we've remembered, and we have to keep remembering what a total disaster we can do. And this was Nagasaki, 49 square miles. Some of them were water, partially settled, and nearly 40% of the town was destroyed. The bomb was one thing, but we've all heard about ionizing radiation afterwards, which these are some of the diseases caused by it, which affected thousands after the war. And I won't drill on this one, but that's the kind of pain they were looking for. So I didn't want to keep that one on too long, but these are other people affected by the bomb. So this is a daughter and mother. No, that's her when she was younger, and that's her now. So older students who survived were instructed by our leaders to dig a hole in the ground, and I cremated my classmates with my own hands. I felt so awful for them. This is nothing like this, but I was going to school in 1947 or 8, I can't remember quite when. And I was in Joliet, Quebec, in a classroom with about 50 students. And we had fluorescent lighting running down rows, and 2 of the rows fell in the class. And we were terrified. And the reaction was, it was the H-bomb. It was the A-bomb. We'd just been bombed. It was terrifying. So, what can I tell you? That was a minor thing. And after the bomb, they said, don't tell anyone. Victims of the bomb generally didn't want it known that they were infected. And that's just FYI. Little Boy was a fishing bomb using uranium, and the fishing bomb the Fat Man used plutonium. And this is the Enola Gay returning to base after dropping the A-bomb. Spring did return. It surely seemed to the Japanese, and perhaps to everyone who saw the photographs and understood, that this was kind of the end of the world. They'd never recover. But in fact, they said the grass wouldn't grow for 75 years, but by the spring the next year, the sparrows had returned. That's one of the witnesses said. So, amazing. Having put this all together, I still find that remarkable. But there they are. Now, the bomb, the essence, the real part of the bomb, was not very big. I found this really surprising. The plutonium core is in that box. They're on their way to do it. It's for Fat Man. Weighs 14 pounds, 14 inches, and only 2 pounds were involved in the reaction. So a quarter of an ounce gets converted to an explosion equivalent of 21,000 tons of TNT. We so have to stay away from this. It's so simple. It's devastating at how dangerous it is. So they dropped the bombs, and surrender came very quickly. It's Churchill, Truman, and Stalin. Russians are good friends, the Russians at the time, and they generally were. These are the terms: unconditional surrender, occupation, disarmament, no more militarism in Japan, democratic reforms, punishment of war crimes, and the status of the emperor. The emperor of Japan was a significant figure in Japan. He stayed on throughout the war. I have a picture of him later. So Truman, who was famously a low-key kind of guy who didn't seem to take things too seriously, and this is at the White House around the time. They had a nice bowling alley. I guess they still do. You can picture Trump out there bowling. So these are just some quotes of reported conversations between Oppenheimer and Truman. So when they first met, Oppenheimer says to Truman, "I have blood on my hands." And Truman is kind of disgusted by him. The meeting went terribly. So he gave him a handkerchief and said, "Well, here, would you like to wipe your hands?" That's one report. This is another report of it. He's telling this to Dean Acheson, who was a defense minister at the time. He says, "Blood on his hands, damn it. He wasn't having half as much blood in his hands as I have. You just don't go around belly aching about it." So this was a true character's. And then he said this afterwards, again to Dean Acheson, "I don't want to see that son of a bitch in my office again. He's just a crybaby scientist." So here's MacArthur, who commanded the Allied troops in World War II against Japan, and Hirohito, the emperor, who survived the war and was allowed to retain his emperorship. So, nuclear states coming up to today. Who's next? Well, Russia, the States, China, France, we heard of those all in the song. Pakistan and India. Not a happy thing. 1972, they joined the group. And like the song, like Tom Lehrer's song, Egypt's going to get one too, just to use on you-know-who. Pakistan got the bomb from North Korea, and then India got the bomb to use on guess who. Israel, as we know, has one, and North Korea, of course. These are just shocking stories. We saw the damage done by one, and there are thousands in the world today. Not as many as there used to be, but when you go from 70,000 down to roughly 21,000, I mean, how much of an improvement is that? And this is the Pakistan. I mean, I found it quite shocking that they were allowed to develop these things in 1972. The international community somehow let it go. And they always choose such charming names for these bombs, like the Smiling Buddha. And under a woman we think highly of, Indira Gandhi. So, and where did the plutonium come from? Chalk River. So we can't be in any way smug about this. So were they justified? Was this whole horror show justified? Well, in 1952, Pew Research said 56% of Americans think that they were justified. There is a generation gap, which I think is kind of good. It seems that more people are learning that they're not justified, but certainly those who experienced it during the war. And of course, we forget the bomb did finish the war like that. It was over, finished. It had gone on killing tens of thousands of people for all those years, and the bombs did what they were supposed to. Japanese instantly stopped the war, as did Germany. Well, it was the time was a little different. But, so, were they justified? I don't know, but they worked. They did what they were supposed to do. They stopped World War II. And we haven't had another world war for 80 years. So this goes back to Oppenheimer. He was actually quite a spiritual guy, and he was very fond of the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu book, and this was something he's purported to have said right after the Trinity test, the first test. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the Mighty One. It would be like God. He called that first test Trinity, and this is why he called it Trinity. Any good Christians. And it came from a poem by John Donne called Batter My Heart, Three-Personed God, the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Batter my heart, three-personed God, for you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend, that I may rise and stand, or throw me and bend, your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. And this is a survivor today. She's 86, and she said, my body trembles with tears and overflows when she thinks about Ukraine and Israel, Gaza, current wars going on. And she said, we must not allow the hell of the atomic bomb to be recreated. I feel a sense of crisis. Today, talking about today. She lived through the first one. She doesn't ever want to see another. And that's it.
Wow. Great.
David, could you make a comment on Chernobyl, which had a huge release of radiation?
Yes. Well, there have been a few, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island,
Yeah,
and there's another one. Well, they have all the effects that the cancers and all of those increases. I haven't done any research about what the general effect
I was
was.
wondering about the spring coming back, the way that it did in the story you were telling. In other words,
Yeah, they just had an article, I think, I saw someplace that in Chernobyl, the wildlife has all come back, and they thought that it was really something.
Yeah,
nice
it
to
came
see.
back quite quickly.
It came back quite
Yeah.
quickly.
And I remember seeing pictures of lawns growing on people's balconies
Yeah,
after Chernobyl.
strange things, strange things.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about Chernobyl is that Alexei Navalny's family, including himself, lived there while he was growing up, and they were privy to what happened in Chernobyl. And that's what led him to understand that what the Russians were saying in the media that they could read at the time from Chernobyl wasn't actually what they were experiencing, which was much worse in Chernobyl. And it showed him at that time that, you know, what was being said was not the truth, and so he was attuned earlier than a lot of other Russians to that fact before the fall of the Iron Curtain. I did want to say, though, that I thought that the quote that Oppenheimer was also known to have stated when he saw the Trinity test was, "I am Shiva, destroyer of worlds." I think that's a worse and more chilling quote. And after having read the dual-authored biography of Oppenheimer, I would push back on his spirituality. I think that it was always understanding seeking faith rather than faith seeking understanding. And I don't think he may have been upset by what happened, but I don't think that he was someone in my reading of that book anyway who brought humility
I think
to
that's possible.
his life.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
David, I think the decision to use the bomb needs to go back to the perspective of the time. That Central campaign in the Nimitz, the Central Pacific Island hopping campaign, that was terribly expensive. I mean, when they reached Okinawa, 20,000 were lost in the Navy just from kamikaze
Right.
aircraft, and they lost another 30 or 40,000 on the ground. And they looked at Japan, and they said, if they're going to behave like this, it's going to cost us $1 million or more than that. That's the arithmetic they were looking at. The other thing about it is the atom bomb wasn't the most destructive instrument. They brought in General LeMay, who became the head of Strategic Air Command, and he changed the bombing from high altitude bombing, which was inaccurate, and I mean, they had headwinds of 50 to 100 miles an hour sometimes, and he asked them the incredible. He said, fly at 5,000 feet at night with incendiaries. Some of those raids killed 100,000. And they systematically went after one city after another after another. So there were many more deaths from conventional bombing.
Oh, many more.
Many more.
Many
Yeah,
more.
what was different was the bomb, the idea of the bomb, of one bomb creating so much damage, and the long-term, medium and long-term effects of the bomb because of radiation.
Right.
And everyone had a sense that a threshold had been passed. And that's what's kept us safe so far. There's that threshold.
Yes.
And even Putin, for all of his threats in Ukraine,
Yeah.
that would be a big, big step.
Yeah.
And that's probably why we've had 80+ years without it.
No, I agree. That's very,
David, I think,
very helpful.
yeah.
I wish I could say something. I hope I don't go too much far, but I've been to Japan about 60 times.
Wow.
I was in Okinawa just after the war, and I read Oppenheimer's books, 900 pages. Took me 3 months to read it. We didn't have it, mister. We had to wait for it to come here. Anybody else read his book? You've read his book?
I have.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have read it.
You've read it.
What's it called?
Well, I really enjoyed reading it. But he was a hard person. I could see why he was nervous a lot of times. And then, as it describes in the book, he couldn't do a lecture like you just did. He had a hard time of doing it, and it said it over and over. But he could learn a language in like 3 weeks.
He was a super
He had
great man.
15 languages.
Wow.
Fantastic. But Okinawa, I was in Okinawa, and in Okinawa they built, I was there for 3 months. And I was in the university there too. Oh, sorry, I'm getting really nervous.
Okay,
You're okay.
we're all friends here.
I'm 84, so it'd be a choice. Anyway, we went to they made a hospital,
Yeah.
but it was to test people who were affected by the bomb. And we had to go there too, because I was at Michigan State University. I got my thing on right now. Michigan State, I had to be in the Army. And I was in the Army for 2 years.
Right,
I
right.
could have been a lieutenant, but I didn't want to be. And so I dropped out after that, and I finished my physics and chemistry. But the reason they took us to that, and the reason they took us to all those places where we went way up in the north, where the last of the war was fought in
Right.
Okinawa. They didn't need to do a bomb because they had burned everything in Japan. My friend that I know, she was there. When they had a tower in Tokyo, everybody had a wooden tower. And she said, when they started the fire bombs, they left fire bombs to burn up everything they could. And no, I don't have any respect for the United States for how they did that. And Truman, no, he was just another horrible guy like Trump to me. Anyway,
Yeah.
they're not good for us at all. But,
But yes, the firebombing was killed.
well, my friend who is a farmer, and I went to see him, and I worked with him for 5 years to learn bonsai.
Wow.
He couldn't grow any grass anymore. He couldn't grow rice. And his father said, there's no possibility of growing rice in Shikoku. Because he said around it, everything's been burned. So he started growing trees. And that's how he got into bonsai. It's a really interesting story about that.
Great story.
I've been to Japan about 60 times. I'm going to go again, I hope, next year. The Japanese people, they are you know, I've been around the world so many places, but mostly in Japan, but I've been to about 50 other countries. And I thought the Japanese people they've always been very good to me. And they weren't bragging about things like this and that, like we seem to do in the States, of course, all the great achievements and all that. But they changed. If you went to, anybody go to Hawaii and look at the museum in Hawaii, wow, the way the Americans portray it and the way the Japanese portray it, in Hiroshima Museum, is quite different.
Okay.
So much different from the way they prepared it. And when we saw that, and my wife was with me too, I said, boy, this is quite surprising, because I said, you haven't been to Japan. She never went to Japan with me. I said, you know, the story is so much different, because they showed pictures of the burned out people. They showed pictures of the backs burned out their whole, and all you saw was bones.
Right.
And horrible pictures, you know. And And I was there, I went again about 10 years ago. They changed it all.
Really?
They said they've done it for 30 years, showing all the horrible stuff. Let's just show some of the people that survived.
Well, I mean, we think very well of the Japanese these days. We drive their cars, we admire the society, we think of them as a particularly peaceful people. That's fascinating, yeah.
Dave, just a quick comment on what you were saying. There was a movie, and the lead character was called Dr. Strangelove. And that was Curtis LeMay.
Yeah.
And very interesting choice. That guy was the bomb.
Very, very good movie, Strangelove.
Now, David,
Yeah.
I'm curious, because firebombing occurred in Europe too, I believe.
Yes, it did. We can go back and look at that.
You
Yeah,
know,
the firebombing, I mean, at some level, the firebombing was far worse than, I went the wrong way. No, I didn't. The firebombing was far worse than don't want to watch it again. It's just that sheet that shows there. I mean, we were talking here of 300,000 total for both bombs, but those are millions at the end. Soviet Union, that's a million. That's 24 million people killed. China, almost 20 million. These are millions. So, and this is firebombing, really. It doesn't, the atom bomb was negligible. So, yeah, we knew how to drop bombs and devastate areas.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it was Shinzo Abe who was he not assassinated recently?
Oh, was he?
Who
No, I
was-
didn't know that.
No, which one?
He was 2018.
Right, because he wanted to remilitarize Japan. I believe that's why.
Oh, okay.
And I just wanted
I
to
don't know
go
this story.
and bring the past and the present together in the sense of what this survivor is saying about the sense of crisis, is that Religions for Peace International emerged in Japan after the Second World War as an initiative of Buddhists who decided to ask the religions of the world to join together, and it became an affiliate of the UN. And at that time, there was not a lot of fundamentalism on the rise. So fundamentalism as an understanding that emerged actually through a series of books here in Niagara on the Lake of evangelical fundamentalism came around in 1915, but it hadn't gained ascendance in the political structure of the States as it does now. And nor was it part and parcel of Israel at the time. So when Religions for Peace was started, there was an idea of leveraging the ideas of peace in all of the main religions of the world for good in the world. It is concerning that now part of the sense of crisis is coming from a certain kind of zealotry that doesn't leverage peace but hate.
No, I still find it remarkable and hopeful that we've avoided using a bomb since, but it's not as though we've suddenly turned into a peaceful people by any means. But anyway, thank you very much. Enjoy it. Think about this too much.
That's a great thought.